This lesson is on Florida legislative history research, and I like to include some historical photos in with the presentation so you can get an idea of what things were like since we're doing history research. And in this picture from the legislature, you can see desks covered in books but without laptops. Before, everybody had their laptops with them, and you'll see the old voting boards in the back that just had lights instead of being the digital boards that we have now. And if you look really closely at their desks, you can see that they were allowed to smoke. There's actually ashtrays sitting on each of the desks. This is a simplified chart showing the route that bills can take in the Florida legislature. But bills can originate in either the House or the Senate, or even in both at the same time as they kind of agree and disagree on language. So while this kind of shows a linear path, it's not really a clean linear path, and things are going on simultaneously and the process is overlapping, and there could be multiple versions and 3 different committees that are all hearing things. So this is definitely a simplified, cleaner version of the chart. I'm going to oversimplify it even more just to kind of show you these historical photos and say that they looked at the language of the bills, they fought it out, tried to change the language again, then they voted. This guy with a solid no, this guy with a 2 thumbs up yes, this guy just trying to please all his constituents with a yes or no undecided vote. And if something does pass, the governor would sign it into law, and you can see him physically signing bills here. Kind of back to our simplified process, the actual process. The documents that you are looking for your legislative history research come from this process. So when a bill is introduced, there's language. That bill language is what you want to look at. Anytime it changes, there's an amendment. You want to find that amendment language. When it comes before the committee, there's documents there, reports, staff analysis. So this process creates information, creates documents, and that's what you look at for legislative history. When is legislative history research necessary? Although we call it history, it also includes tracking new and pending statutes. So before something's passed into law, if you want to see if it actually is going to get passed and you want to see those documents the committee's reading or see the videos of the committee, you could use these websites and information to do that kind of tracking. But often when we talk about legislative history research, it's about when existing statutes, ones that have already been passed, and the language is ambiguous and statutory interpretation results in a doubtful meaning. So also, people are also curious about when certain language might have been added to a statute, and that's another reason that you do legislative history research. So in order to do this research, we need 3 different numbers, and those 3 numbers are produced when it travels from bill to statute. First, the legislature passes a bill, and the entire time that it's traveling through that process, it has a bill number. So in this case, in 2009, there was a bill number from the Senate, 1840. Once it's passed, it's published as a session law in the laws of Florida, and the session law number of the Senate bill 1840 was 2009, so that's the second number. And then we have the publication in Florida statutes, or the codification in Florida statutes. So 1840 turned into 2009-79, and then it becomes Florida Statute 210.011. Depending on the time period of when a law was passed, you may or may not be able to find a lot of legislative history materials. So prior to 1969, pretty much nothing exists. They didn't keep anything around. 1969 to mid-70s, you have some things, but not a lot. You're going to probably have to go to the archives for those. Mid-70s to 1988, the complete collections at the archive. We've been starting to digitize some things at the Research Center, but it's not a comprehensive collection. You would really want to go to the archives to double check anything from mid-70s to 1988. Then once we hit 1988 to 1997, again, it's all at the archives. Some of it's online, and we have some of it at FSU as well. And then 1997 to present is when the websites started capturing that information, so you can find things on the House and Senate websites. And then the most recent years, you can also get the videos of committee hearings and things like that, but that might only be 2018, 2019. The different parts of a legislative history, the staff analysis. The committee that is assigned the bill will often write a report about the bill, and so that has information beyond like the language itself. The bill is just the language of the bill and any amendments that were made during session. The House and Senate journals contain a summary of daily activities of the House and Senate during session. We have committee hearings and floor debates, and governor statements where the governor may or may not issue a statement when they are signing or vetoing a bill. One of our librarians at the Research Center created this really helpful chart that goes through the different parts of a legislative history and shows you where things are available, Westlaw, Lexis, online, in the state archives, and it goes by year. So when you need to do legislative history of an existing statute, existing language, something that's already been passed, you're going to start in Florida statutes, either Online Sunshine, Westlaw, Lexis, and look at the language of the statute. Then you scroll down to the bottom and look for either a credit section, or it's sometimes called a history section, and it's going to show you when the law was created and provide you with a session law number. So this shows you added 2009 and shows you the session law number right there. In that last example, there was just one. The first thing listed is when it was enacted, and there have been no additional amendments, but other laws are amended pretty often. So the first one listed in this case, 1967, it shows you when it was enacted, and then each subsequent Laws of Florida number is an amendment, so the language changed. So if you needed to find out when language was added or removed from a statute, you use this credit or history line, and you start either at the end or at the beginning, and you move backwards one by one and look for that language that you're looking to see whether it was deleted or added in a specific year. So if you are using Westlaw or Lexis, this is obviously the most efficient and fastest way, because you're looking at the statute, you scroll down to the bottom, and a lot of times those session law numbers are hyperlinked, so you can just click on them. So in this case, you can click on the 2009, and it's going to pull up that session law, and in the header it shows you the bill number. Remember, we need those three numbers: the statute number, the session law number, and the bill number. We're working backwards, and we've used the session law number to find the bill number. So you click on it, and this is in the header, and now we need to remember 1840. Westlaw and Lexis, for some bills, also have legislative history materials within Westlaw and Lexis. So there's a tab for legislative history materials. You could click there and go through the materials. If nothing is listed, you would just take your bill number from Westlaw and go back into the House and Senate websites and look for materials there. So now going back and pretending we didn't have access to Westlaw or Lexis, how would you do the search? Again, you look at your statute, go down to the credit section, and find your Laws of Florida number, your session law number, but it's not a clickable link on Online Sunshine. You then have to go into the actual Laws of Florida, either print or online, to find a bill number. If you go to laws.flrules.org, you can view them online. You're going to choose the appropriate year from the drop-down menu, and then just scroll through the list to find your session law number. So in our case, you scroll down, you find 2009-79, and on the list itself, you can see the Senate bill number, 1840, or you can click on the PDF, open it up, look at the actual session law, and again, it's in that header. 1840 is found right there. So now that we know our three numbers and you know that bill number, you can search for documents. But do you go to the House or the Senate website? In this case, it was a Senate bill, but you can also go to the House website, and vice versa. They contain the history and all the documentation for both House and Senate bills. And just so you know, House bills are odd numbers and Senate bills are even. So this is what the current Florida House of Representatives website looks like. Up in the top, you can search by bill number. You just choose your year and enter a bill number. Or you can search by text, so you can choose some words from a bill and see if you can find it that way. If you want a complete list of all of the bills that were passed in a year, you can choose a year like 2020 or 2019. Don't put anything in either of these two and hit search, and it'll give you a list of everything. Florida Senate, pretty similar. Again, at the top, you have a bill number and you have a year, so you can choose there the year and a bill number, and the same thing works if you want to see the complete list of bills. You leave that blank and you hit go, and it'll provide you with the whole list. So once you find a bill and you click on it, it provides you with things like the bill history, the related bills, bill text, staff analysis, vote history. So these are the important things you want to look through to get an idea of what was going on when it was passed. So the bill text is literally just the language of the bill that they were looking at. And so if it is an amendment to an existing bill, you might see language crossed out or added, but it's just no analysis, just, again, the language of the bill itself. The staff analysis has a little bit more information. It has things like a summary of what the bill does, why the bill was necessary, things like fiscal impacts, any constitutional implications. These are all listed in the staff analysis. If you're interested in something like committee hearings, this is something that's easier to find now and was not very easy to do in the past. So there's nothing in print. There's no transcripts, there's no index. They were recorded on CDs or even the old stuff on audio tapes. Some of it has really poor quality, but if you go to the archive, they can find the tapes in the boxes, and they will set you up with something to listen to them, and you can listen to the entire hearing. Again, there's no index, there's no transcript, and you're not going to know whether they're going to talk about specifically what you think they're going to talk about. They might be talking about a bill in general, but not, the aspect that you needed to hear. So it's just kind of a bit of due diligence to say that you've listened to it and they didn't talk about it, or find that they did talk about it, but it is a lot easier now to do this kind of research. So if you needed to find any of those committee hearings, you can go to the state archives with a bill number, committee name, and a date, and they can try and find it for you. It used to take 1 to 2 years after session to get from the committee to archives, but a lot of this information is online now. So for the past 2 years, you can look at the website. So if you were looking for those committee hearings now for the recent years, you can go to the main Florida House of Representatives website and click on the committees on the menu there. And then it'll go through and list all of the committees and subcommittees. And when you choose one, it'll show you who are members of the committee or subcommittee. And on the right side lists documents from the committee that year. They have the video archives, and in some cases they have podcasts. And you can adjust years. Sometimes they have 18 and 19 as well. So another part of Florida legislative history research is seeing the governor signing statements. Again, they didn't always make a statement. Sometimes when they were vetoing or signing a bill into law, they would add some extra language, but sometimes they just signed. You can look at state archives for these statements. They were published in the House and Senate journals, and some cases on the governor's website, but this changes from administration to administration. If you wanted to look at the House and Senate journals, these contain things like voting records, the text of floor amendments, committee action, and governor's veto statements. So this is the daily activities of the legislature, and it's not necessarily useful for interpreting statutes. The courts use it to look for an accurate accounting of what was actually done when a law was passed. So what was the date of the first reading, the second reading, the third reading, etc. You can find those House and Senate journals in print. We have all the way back to 1897 in the Research Center, and online they have back to 1998, usually available online the very next day when legislature is in session. And to find those House and Senate journals on the Florida Senate website, if you go to Home, there's a listing for journals, and then it'll ask you what year and whether you want the bound journals or the daily journals if it's the current legislative session. And this is what a page from the journal looks like. You'll just see it goes through kind of what happened over the course of the day, and you can see what the Senate did. Again, I had mentioned that we are often asked to track when language was added. So you'll look at the statutes, start with the year it was enacted or the last year, and then compare the language as it changed. The session law shows it marked up and shows you crossed out language for something when it was deleted, or they'll put it in a different font or bolded if it's new language added. So you use the session laws in order to track when language was added. To find current and pending legislative information, you're just going to use those Florida House and Florida Senate websites. If you go to the main page, it'll tell you what's going on usually that day. They also have trackers where you can sign up and enter a bill number, and they'll tell you as something is heard in committee or passed by the House.